Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the next 2 days. Normally I say by the end of the year, but obviously that's going to happen. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second, and it makes a massive difference. Real quick, the reason you are getting a 2K talk on Tuesday instead of the usual Wednesday or Thursday, depending on scheduling, is because I literally spent 5 hours yesterday writing an entire script, only to realize that B-Souls had already made the exact video that I had just written. And I wasted all that time to make something that was like 60% the same video that he did, and obviously I cannot release that, so I had to drop that and cut that script and not make a video on it. So there was not going to be a video today unless I did this. Tomorrow there's going to be a normal video on the Milwaukee Bucks and why they're struggling versus the Miami Heat thus far, and why they've struggled in the playoffs so far in general. So yeah, that's why this is happening. So Jamal Murray has been losing his fucking mind in the playoffs this year alongside Donovan Mitchell. Now, Mitchell, he probably deserves his own video, and I might do one, but I'm currently going to be focusing on Jamal Murray because his was a lot less expected. Jamal Murray has had a weird career thus far, and I mean, it's safe to say that he has been at the top of his game. He's been blowing everybody's mind. He's been headed in the right direction, you could say. Blowjob jokes. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about, and it's in the thumbnail. But Jamal Murray has been an up and down player thus far, and he's really kind of been a little bit disappointing. He came in with like all-star level player hype and had some comparisons to Stephen Curry, even though, you know, those comparisons were not well-founded. And he was expected to be this 20-plus point per game scorer on really good efficiency and be capable of being like a top player and on a championship team like the Denver Nuggets, the second player to Nikola Jokic. And it's safe to say that he hasn't really been that, but it's not like he hasn't been paid like it because, well, he's been paid like it. He got I think it was either max or near maximum extension in the previous offseason, only to put up essentially the same numbers this year that he did last year, which was a semi-efficient 18.5 points and 5 assists. So, not phenomenal. And he was pretty much expected to be that. But last year, he did have a pretty good playoff run that left room to be like, maybe this guy can take some next steps, which is kind of why he got that contract. But came back this season, not quite that. And his playoff performance last year, over 14 games in 2 7-game series, he averaged 21 points, 5 assists, and he was pretty efficient. And he was stepping up in big moments for the Denver Nuggets, because the one thing that's been lacking on the Denver Nuggets has been shot creation, and that's where Jamal Murray needs to step up, and he did step up for them many times in 2 very close series. And this year, well, he's gone fucking insane, is the best way to put it. Because let me just read off his numbers in the first 6 games versus the Utah Jazz. Jamal Murray has averaged 34 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists, with only 2 turnovers, on 58.5% shooting from the field, 57.5% shooting from 3, and 91% from the free throw line, with a true shooting percentage of 72.8%. That is absurd. The guy's had 2 50-point games in this series, which that's the first time that's happened since Michael motherfucking Jordan. So it's safe to say that he's gone insane. And what I want to put a focus on is, what does this mean for Jamal Murray in the future in terms of what level of player he's going to be from here on out? We obviously have Game 7 that's going to be on in a couple hours after this video goes up, and we'll see how he performs there. I'm assuming he's going to perform amazing once more. But I want to talk about what's next for Jamal Murray after this run, and if this is just a case of someone being hot, or if this is actually something substantial. Well, The first thing that I would say to point in the direction of this being something substantial is the fact that the guy has been taking way more three-pointers. Jamal Murray's main argument for him being a really good lottery talent and a star-level player was that he was going to be a really good three-point shooter in the NBA, and thus far, for a starting shooting guard, he's been very mid. For his last 3 seasons as a starting shooting guard, he has averaged 5.5 three-point attempts on around 36.5% shooting, which is very mediocre for a starting shooting guard. It's not bad, but as a guy who is touted as a very good shooter coming into the league, it's certainly not great. And you think with him playing with a guy like Nikola Jokic, who's such a good playmaker, and him being the guard himself, having that luxury that a lot of other point guards don't have, you would think that he would be a much more efficient three-point shooter and a higher volume three-point shooter, and that's not been the case. However, in this playoff series, he has been taking 9 three-pointers a game. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that he's hitting 5 of those motherfuckers a game, and that's obviously not going to hold up because if it did, he'd be the greatest three-point shooter of all time. But he has been taking the volume of threes that you would like to see him take, and he's been taking more of them off of the dribble. For his career, he has about 70% of his three-pointers assisted. In the playoffs thus far this year, he has just under 40% of his three-pointers assisted. So that's a 30% curve, and his percentage in attempts has gone up as he's been more willing to take them off of the dribble. Really, I think what's been the case with Denver is, and what's kind of held back Jamal Murray a little bit in terms of these three-point attempts, is that Denver really has this system and they kind of just play into the system. But really, sometimes you just need to let a guy take over, and Jamal Murray has taken over in light of the fact that Denver's offensive system has gone a little wonky in the playoffs and hasn't really worked quite as well as in the regular season. And that's kind of why he stood out in last year's playoffs, because this need to take over persisted and somebody had to do it. And he wasn't phenomenal, but he certainly looked a lot better than he normally was when he was put in this position to take over games. And this year in the playoffs, he's been put in that position once more, and we've seen the results. And I think maybe it would benefit the Denver Nuggets and certainly benefit Jamal Murray to get a little bit more loose with their offense, have a little bit less of a reliance on a system, and allow Jamal Murray to have a couple shots per game where he is just taking over the offense. And I think that would result in more three-pointers and an overall better offense because it's also less predictable. And in terms of if I think Jamal Murray can be like a star-level player after this playoff series, I really think this depends on how Denver goes and what direction Denver goes in that sort of thing. Like, are they going to stick with this scheme furthermore and continue to hardline, like we're going to do Nikola Jokic is the center of the offense and Jamal Murray is only going to get three-pointers coming off of screens and he's not dribbling the ball as much as you'd like him to? If they keep going in that direction, then I don't see why Jamal Murray would have much change. But if Jamal Murray starts taking over games and Denver's system allows him to start taking over games, I expect him to shoot more threes, I expect him to shoot better from three, and I expect him to overall be a better player. If Jamal Murray averages like 8 three-point attempts, which is even kind of low on the low end for the type of shooter he's supposed to be, he would easily be a 20-point per game scorer on very good efficiency. And I think that's reason enough alone that you go ahead and give him these opportunities. Now, what's interesting is that Denver next year is going to go all the way in on Michael Porter Jr. This year, they dipped the toe in the bubble and dipped it a bit out as the playoffs went in just because he hasn't had enough experience, which is completely understandable. But Jamal Murray, I don't know if he's going to be getting that much more shots next year because a lot of those shots are going to be going to Michael Porter Jr., and that's going to be an interesting balance to strike because you have this up-and-coming guy, but you also have this guy who's been on your team for a while who's finally starting to break out, and you kind of want both to happen simultaneously, but you don't want to break from your system, but you also don't want to hold those guys back, but it's also hard to cater to all three of those things at once. So it's going to be an interesting situation, and I do think that's also going to be interesting for Nikola Jokic in terms of his role in the offense. I think the guy is going to be looked at less as the scoring option because really I think both Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are better scorers than Nikola Jokic. Jokic is obviously a much better offensive player because his vision is on another level. But in terms of just purely putting the ball in the basket, both are better shooters and both are ball handlers, and they don't rely on the post. They rely on more isolation and pull-up shooting. And in 2020, having that kind of offensive skill set is better than a post-up skill set. And I definitely could see them both next year averaging more shot attempts than Nikola Jokic and more points than Nikola Jokic, even though Jokic will still be the best player and offensive player and overall player on the team. But for Jamal Murray, what I think has to happen in order for this level of dominance to persist is he has to take more three-pointers, and he has to continue to shoot well with those three-pointers. So Jamal Murray, in terms of if he can be a star and if this playoff series is a sign of that, really I think it's shown the value of a guard taking a lot of threes off of the dribble. Obviously, he's not going to shoot 57% when that happens, but he can still be awesome, and he can still have games like this on a pretty regular level because the guy is very clearly a better shooter than his percentage and attempts would indicate thus far in his career. And it's time that Denver's offense started treating him like it, and it's time he started playing like it. So that's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.